Hello, my beautiful Taurus. Welcome back. I hope you're doing well today. As I sit with your energy, today's reading feels quiet at first, but underneath that silence, something is beginning to move. It feels like someone who believed they could keep their feelings locked away is starting to realize that silence has only made those feelings louder. So let's see where this energy wants to take us. The first card that gently reveals itself is the Four of Swords. I almost hear the room becoming still. It feels like this person stepped away for much longer than they expected. They may have convinced themselves that distance would solve everything. Maybe they believed enough time would soften their emotions, that life would simply carry both of you in different directions. But instead of forgetting you, Taurus, they kept finding little reminders of you in the most ordinary moments. A familiar song, a certain place, even a quiet evening when their thoughts refused to settle. The silence they created became a space where your energy echoed even louder. Then I noticed the Page of Swords, and it feels like curiosity has quietly replaced avoidance. This person may not fully understand why you're still on their mind, but they're no longer pretending that you're not. They wonder what you're doing these days. They wonder if you've changed. They wonder whether someone else has stepped into the place they once had the chance to fill. Yeah, it almost feels like they're watching life move forward while realizing they may have been standing still this entire time. What's interesting is that I don't feel this realization happened overnight. It seems to have arrived little by little, almost without them noticing. One thought became another. One memory turned into 10. Eventually, they reached a point where they couldn't ignore what their own heart was trying to tell them anymore. And then the Five of Cups appears, bringing an energy that feels incredibly reflective. I don't see someone simply missing you. I see someone replaying moments they wish they could handle differently, conversations they should have had, messages they never sent, opportunities they quietly let disappear because they assumed there would always be another chance. Oh my God! Sometimes people don't recognize the value of a connection until they experience what life feels like without it. For many of you, Taurus, this person may be realizing that your patience was never something to take for granted. You offered understanding. You offered consistency. You may have stayed present far longer than most people would have. It feels like they're finally looking back with clearer eyes, recognizing that what they once viewed as ordinary was actually something very rare. I also get the feeling that one fear keeps growing stronger inside them. It isn't simply the fear of rejection. It feels more personal than that. The energy suggests they're beginning to wonder if you've already accepted life without them. Maybe you've found peace. Maybe you've stopped waiting. Maybe you've discovered that your happiness doesn't depend on hearing from them anymore. That possibility seems to weigh heavily on their heart because they know they were the one who allowed so much time to pass. Now the Judgment card quietly enters this reading, and everything shifts. It feels less like regret and more like awakening. Something inside this person is asking difficult questions they can no longer avoid. Why did I stay silent? Why did I keep protecting my pride? Why did I assume Taurus would always understand? Those questions don't seem to come from guilt alone. They feel like the beginning of genuine honesty with themselves. I don't feel they're rushing toward an answer just yet. This energy feels thoughtful, careful. They seem to understand that reaching out isn't just about sending a message. It's about being ready to show up differently than before. That's a much bigger step than simply picking up a phone. I also sense this person imagining different possibilities. They think about what they would say if they contacted you. They rewrite conversations inside their mind. They wonder if you would answer immediately, wait a while, or perhaps not answer at all. Every possibility teaches them something about how much this connection truly matters. What stands out most is that they no longer seem to be asking whether they have feelings. That part feels settled. The real question becoming louder now is whether they've waited too long to express those feelings honestly. And as that thought continues to grow, another layer of this story begins to unfold, because the silence may have ended inside their heart long before they find the courage to let you hear it. The moon is the card that immediately catches my attention here, Taurus, and the atmosphere changes in such a quiet but powerful way. It feels like this person has entered a season where logic isn't leading the way anymore. They're trying to make sense of something that simply refuses to fit into neat explanations. I almost see them lying awake long after everyone else has gone to sleep, staring at the ceiling, wondering why your name continues to drift into their thoughts without invitation. It seems like they have spent so much energy trying to organize their emotions into something reasonable. They may have told themselves that timing wasn't right, or that life was too complicated, or that there were simply too many differences between the two of you. Maybe your lifestyles weren't the same. Maybe your priorities looked different. Maybe they believed those differences were enough to convince themselves that walking away was the practical choice. But feelings rarely follow practical rules. The more they tried to file this connection away as something they needed to move on from, the more their heart quietly pushed back. That's what feels so fascinating about this energy. Their mind keeps searching for explanations, but their soul doesn't seem interested in debating anymore. It simply keeps bringing you back into the picture. The Six of Cups begins to reveal itself, and I almost smile because the energy softens immediately. Memories seem to arrive without warning. A certain laugh, a conversation they didn't appreciate enough at the time, the way you listened when they weren't making much sense themselves. It's almost as though ordinary moments have suddenly become the most meaningful ones. Yeah, it's interesting because I don't feel like they're remembering dramatic events. The energy suggests they're missing the little things, the comfortable silence between conversations, the feeling of being understood without having to explain every emotion, the simple moments that never seemed extraordinary until they were gone. Sometimes we don't recognize peace while we're living inside it. We only notice it once the noise returns. I also feel that this person has compared other connections to what they experienced with you, whether consciously or unconsciously. They may have met new people. They may have tried to distract themselves with work, responsibilities, or even other relationships. Yet every comparison quietly brings them back to the same conclusion. Something always feels incomplete. Not because other people aren't wonderful, but because what they experienced with you carried a different emotional texture. The Hermit appears, and I feel this person withdrawing into themselves, not because they want to escape, but because they're searching for answers they can't seem to find anywhere else. There are moments when they stop listening to outside opinions altogether. Friends can give advice. Family can tell them what they should do, but deep inside, they seem to realize this is a decision nobody else can make for them. It feels like they're finally becoming honest about what they truly want, instead of what they think they're supposed to want. Oh my God, that realization can be uncomfortable. Because once you admit something to yourself, pretending becomes much harder. The Eight of Swords adds another layer that feels incredibly human. I don't actually see someone trapped by circumstances as much as I see someone trapped by their own thoughts. They replay conversations from every possible angle. They wonder whether you misunderstood them. They wonder whether they misunderstood you. Every possibility creates another question instead of another answer. It almost feels like they're standing in front of a door that has never actually been locked, yet they've convinced themselves they don't know how to turn the handle. Fear has a way of creating invisible walls. The energy also suggests that this person worries about whether you've changed during the time apart. People grow, priorities shift, hearts heal. They can't quite predict where your emotional world is today, and that uncertainty seems to make them hesitate even more. Still, no matter how many questions appear, your presence doesn't seem to fade. If anything, it grows stronger in unexpected moments. They could be driving somewhere familiar and suddenly think about you. They could hear someone mention a place you've been together, and their mind instantly wanders. Even when life becomes busy, your energy quietly finds its way back into their awareness. There's something beautifully persistent about this connection. It doesn't seem loud, it doesn't demand attention, it simply remains present, almost like a melody they believed they had forgotten until they heard the first few notes again. What I find most interesting is that this person appears to be reaching the point where avoiding their feelings requires far more effort than simply acknowledging them. And once that inner balance begins to shift, the path ahead starts revealing challenges they may no longer be able to ignore. Justice steps into this reading with an energy that feels impossible to ignore, Taurus. It isn't loud or dramatic, it's quiet, steady, almost like someone sitting alone with their own thoughts and finally allowing themselves to stop making excuses. I feel like your person has reached a place where they're beginning to recognize that every decision carries a consequence, not as a punishment, but as a lesson they can no longer look away from. It seems like life has become heavier for them recently. Responsibilities may be piling up from different directions. Work doesn't feel as satisfying as it once did. Family expectations seem harder to carry. Even the things that used to distract them don't appear to be working anymore. It's almost as though every area of their life is asking them the same question. Are you being honest with yourself? Sometimes the loudest wake-up call isn't a single event. Sometimes it's the weight of everything happening at once. As I continue shuffling, the devil appears, and I immediately feel the struggle they've been having within themselves. This doesn't necessarily feel like another person standing between you. It feels much closer than that. It feels like fear wearing different disguises. Fear of vulnerability, fear of rejection, fear of losing control. They may have convinced themselves they were protecting their heart, when in reality, they were building walls around it so high that even they couldn't find the way back out. Yeah, pride has a strange way of pretending its strength. This person may have believed that keeping their emotions hidden would make everything easier. They might have thought silence would protect them from disappointment. But instead, that silence slowly created distance between them and the one person they genuinely cared about. The energy suggests they're beginning to understand that protecting themselves also meant pushing away someone who never intended to hurt them. I also feel moments where they replay situations involving you, not because they're stuck in the past, but because they're finally seeing those moments from a completely different perspective. Conversations they once brushed aside suddenly carry new meaning. Your patience, your understanding, the way you stayed calm even when things felt uncertain. They're realizing those weren't ordinary qualities. They were gifts they simply didn't know how to receive at the time. Death arrives beside these cards, and oh my God, this energy feels deeply personal. It doesn't feel like an ending between the two of you. It feels like an ending inside of them. I sense an old version of this person beginning to fall away, the version that always needed to be right, the version that let fear make important decisions, the version that believed love could wait forever. Transformation rarely feels comfortable. Sometimes it asks us to let go of habits we've carried for years before we can become someone new. The energy suggests they're starting to recognize that if they truly want another chance with you, Taurus, they can't return as the same person who walked away emotionally before. It wouldn't be enough to send a message or offer an apology if nothing inside has genuinely shifted. They're beginning to understand that change isn't something they say. It's something they live. The Ten of Wands makes this realization feel even more intense. I see someone carrying emotional weight they never allowed anyone else to see. They've been trying to manage everything on their own, telling themselves they could handle it without asking for help or admitting they were overwhelmed. But the burden seems to have become too heavy. Interestingly, I don't feel like you're the burden. You're the person they think about when the burden becomes too much. There's a difference. When life feels chaotic, their thoughts seem to drift toward the peace they associated with you. They remember the feeling of being understood. They remember how much lighter everything seemed whenever they allowed themselves to be emotionally present with you. That's becoming harder for them to ignore because their current reality doesn't offer that same sense of comfort. I also sense that guilt has begun transforming into responsibility. Those are two very different energies. Guilt keeps people frozen. Responsibility encourages people to grow. It feels like they're slowly crossing that bridge, realizing that blaming circumstances or timing no longer explains what happened. They may not be able to rewrite the past, but they're beginning to believe they still have a choice about what they do next. The energy feels less focused on regret and more focused on becoming someone worthy of rebuilding trust. That journey doesn't appear simple, and it certainly doesn't seem quick. But something inside this person is quietly preparing them to face truths they've avoided for a long time. As those truths continue coming to the surface, another layer of this story begins revealing why certain choices were made in the first place and what they're finally ready to leave behind. The Seven of Swords comes forward first, Taurus, and the feeling around this card is much more vulnerable than I expected. It doesn't feel like someone who was trying to hurt you on purpose. It feels like someone who kept choosing the path that seemed easier in the moment, only to discover later that easy decisions often carry the heaviest consequences. I feel like there were influences surrounding this person that slowly shaped the way they looked at your connection, and they didn't question those influences nearly enough. Sometimes people become so focused on avoiding discomfort that they stop listening to their own heart. It seems like this person spent a long time allowing outside voices to become louder than their own intuition. For some of you, that may have been family expectations, people telling them what a relationship should look like, what success should look like, who they should choose. For others, it may have been responsibilities that always came first, leaving very little room for emotional honesty. The energy even suggests that for some, there may have been another connection they believed they needed to stay committed to, not because it fulfilled them, but because it felt familiar or difficult to walk away from. Whatever the situation looked like, I don't feel they were seeing you clearly. They were seeing you through the lens of fear. The devil appears again, and this time it feels less like temptation and more like control. I sense someone who believed they had to manage every possible outcome before allowing themselves to love freely. They wanted certainty before vulnerability. They wanted guarantees before taking emotional risks. But love rarely arrives with guarantees, does it? Yeah, that's the part they seem to be wrestling with now. The energy suggests they're beginning to recognize that so many of the barriers they blamed on circumstances were actually fears they carried inside themselves. Fear of commitment, fear of making the wrong decision, fear of opening their heart completely. Those fears became so convincing that they started mistaking them for reality. I also feel this person realizing that they underestimated you in ways they never intended to. They may have assumed your kindness meant you would always stay. They may have believed your patience had no limit. They may have thought your heart would always leave the door open, no matter how long they waited outside it. Oh my God. People sometimes confuse consistency with permanence. Those are not the same thing. Justice returns, bringing a completely different perspective than before. I almost hear this person saying to themselves, I wasn't being fair. Not only toward you, but toward the connection itself. They're beginning to see how often they questioned your intentions, while rarely questioning their own fears. It's as though a mirror has been placed in front of them, and for the first time they're looking into it without immediately turning away. The energy feels deeply humbling. They're recognizing that Taurus wasn't asking for perfection. You were asking for honesty. You weren't asking them to have every answer. You simply wanted them to show up with sincerity. That realization seems to be changing everything about the way they remember you. Instead of focusing on what made the connection complicated, they're beginning to appreciate what made it genuine. They remember your steadiness, your loyalty, the quiet way you made people feel safe. Those qualities may have seemed ordinary before, but they don't anymore. They seem incredibly rare. The Chariot enters with an energy that feels stronger than anything we've seen so far. I don't interpret this as someone acting impulsively. Quite the opposite. It feels like someone finally deciding they can no longer remain stuck between what they feel and what they do. For a long time, hesitation may have been their comfort zone. They could think about you without making a move. They could miss you without changing anything. But that space no longer feels comfortable. It seems like they're reaching a point where staying still hurts more than taking a chance. I also sense they're imagining what rebuilding trust would actually require. Not grand promises, not dramatic declarations, just consistent actions. Showing up, following through, being present in ways they weren't before. They seem to understand that if another opportunity ever appears, it won't be because words are enough. It will be because their actions finally match what their heart has been trying to say all along. There's a quiet determination growing inside this person. It isn't driven by panic. It feels driven by clarity. They may not know exactly how everything will unfold, but the energy suggests they're becoming more willing to move toward what matters instead of away from it. As that determination continues to strengthen, another gentle shift begins taking shape, one that feels much more personal because it centers on a message they may have been trying to send long before they found the courage to let you read it. The Page of Cups appears so gently here, Taurus, that it almost feels like someone standing in front of their phone, typing a message, reading it over, deleting it, and starting all over again. This energy feels incredibly hesitant. Not because they don't have something to say, but because they care much more than they're willing to admit. Every word suddenly feels important. Every sentence feels like it could change everything. I almost hear them asking themselves, what if Taurus doesn't want to hear from me anymore? That question seems to follow them everywhere. The energy suggests this person has imagined reaching out more times than they could probably count. Maybe they've opened your conversation before closing it again. Maybe they've searched for the perfect moment only to convince themselves it wasn't the right time. They keep waiting for certainty, yet certainty never seems to arrive. Instead, what keeps growing is the feeling that remaining silent may no longer be the safest choice. Yeah, sometimes courage doesn't feel fearless. Sometimes courage looks exactly like someone with shaking hands deciding to press send. The Page of Cups also carries an innocence that surprises me. Beneath everything that's happened, I don't actually sense someone trying to impress you anymore. It feels like they're becoming more interested in simply being genuine. They seem tired of pretending they're unaffected, tired of acting as though everything has been perfectly fine. The energy feels softer than before, almost as if the walls they've hidden behind are beginning to crack naturally. As I continue, the Knight of Cups steps forward, and I immediately feel movement. Not rushed movement, intentional movement. This person seems to be imagining something much more meaningful than a casual conversation. It feels like they don't just want to exchange messages. They want to sit across from you, to hear your voice again, to look into your eyes and understand the parts of your life they've missed while distance kept growing between you. I feel like they're beginning to realize that so much can be misunderstood through silence. Some things need presence. Some things need honesty, spoken face to face. Oh my God, I almost see them wondering what it would be like to spend an ordinary afternoon with you. Nothing dramatic. Just sharing coffee, going for a drive, walking somewhere without feeling the need to fill every moment with words. It's interesting because their imagination doesn't seem focused on grand romantic gestures anymore. They're thinking about real life. They wonder what your daily routine looks like now. They wonder if you've picked up new hobbies. They wonder whether you still laugh the same way. They wonder how you've been carrying yourself through everything life has placed in front of you. It feels like they want to know the version of Taurus that exists today, not just the memories they've been holding on to. Strength quietly enters the reading, and I don't interpret this as physical courage. It feels emotional. The kind of courage that's required to admit you've made mistakes without expecting immediate forgiveness. The energy suggests this person understands that trust isn't something they can ask for. It's something they'll have to earn little by little. That realization seems incredibly important. I don't feel they're expecting one conversation to erase everything that happened. Instead, they appear willing to start with something much smaller, one honest message, one sincere conversation, one opportunity to simply listen instead of defending themselves. That feels like growth. I also sense they're becoming less concerned about saying the perfect thing and more concerned about showing consistency afterward. Words may open a door, but they seem to understand that actions are what allow someone to walk through it. That's why I keep feeling this quiet determination. Not dramatic promises, just a genuine desire to become someone whose actions create peace instead of uncertainty. The Two of Cups brings an incredibly warm energy into the reading. It feels like this person has stopped seeing this connection as something they need to control and started seeing it as something they hope to nurture. There's a beautiful difference between those two perspectives. Control creates pressure. Care creates space. It seems like they want to rebuild from the smallest moments. Learning about your world again, listening to your stories, understanding what has changed and what has remained the same. They may even be hoping you'll allow them to discover parts of you they never truly took the time to notice before. I also feel they're carrying one quiet hope close to their heart. Not that everything returns to the way it was, but that something stronger could eventually grow from greater honesty. Whether that happens immediately doesn't seem to be the focus anymore. They're beginning to understand that meaningful connections are built one sincere step at a time. That gentle shift in perspective prepares the energy for something even more significant, because the distance that once felt impossible to cross may soon be replaced by a decision that has been waiting much longer than either of you realized. Judgment returns one more time, Taurus, and this time the energy feels different. Earlier, it felt like someone waking up to their own emotions. Here, it feels like they're waking up to the reality that time doesn't stand still. I keep hearing this quiet realization inside them. If I keep waiting, I may lose this chance forever. It isn't panic that I'm feeling. It's clarity, the kind of clarity that only arrives after someone has spent far too long sitting with the consequences of their own choices. There comes a moment when the heart becomes louder than every excuse we've been telling ourselves. It feels like your person is reaching that moment. The energy suggests they're no longer asking whether they should reach out. They're beginning to ask themselves how. How do they rebuild trust? How do they approach someone whose patience they may have tested? How do they show Taurus that this isn't another temporary emotion that will disappear after a few days? Those questions seem to matter much more to them than finding the perfect words. The Chariot comes forward with a sense of quiet determination that feels refreshing after everything we've walked through together in this reading. For so long, hesitation seemed to define this person's actions. Every feeling was followed by doubt. Every intention was followed by delay. But something appears to have shifted inside them. The energy suggests they're becoming tired of watching life happen from the sidelines. Yeah, observing your own story is very different from participating in it. I almost see this person realizing that every day they postpone reaching out is another day where someone else could become part of your world. Even if nothing like that is happening, the possibility alone seems enough to move something inside them. They understand they no longer have control over time, and perhaps they never really did. Instead of trying to predict every possible outcome, they seem more willing to accept uncertainty. That's actually one of the biggest changes I noticed throughout this entire reading. Earlier, uncertainty frightened them. Now it seems more frightening to remain exactly where they are. The Ace of Cups enters so beautifully that the entire atmosphere softens again. This doesn't feel like someone trying to recreate the past. It feels like someone hoping they can meet you with a heart that's more open than it has ever been before. I don't sense perfection here. I sense sincerity. Oh my God, there's something incredibly human about that. It feels like they understand love isn't proven by dramatic speeches. It's shown through consistency, through showing up, through listening, through making space for another person's feelings instead of only protecting their own. I also keep sensing this image of a message that's almost ready to be sent. Maybe the words aren't finished yet. Maybe they're still rewriting them in their mind. But the intention behind them feels stronger than it once did. It seems like they don't want the conversation to stay inside their imagination anymore. For many of you, I feel this person isn't hoping for an immediate solution. They're hoping for an opportunity to see you, to hear how you've truly been, to sit together without pretending everything is fine. They want to experience your presence instead of simply remembering it. The star brings such a peaceful energy into the reading that I can't help but smile. It feels like hope has quietly survived everything that both of you have experienced. Not blind hope, mature hope. The kind that understands healing takes time. The kind that knows trust grows gradually, one honest moment after another. It also feels like they're beginning to see you differently than they ever have before. Not simply as someone they loved or cared about, but as someone who inspired growth within them without even trying. Your steadiness became a mirror. Your patience revealed where they lacked patience with themselves. Your authenticity quietly encouraged them to stop hiding behind fear. That realization may become one of the greatest gifts they carry forward. Whether this unfolds exactly as they imagine remains unwritten, because every heart still has free will. Every journey has its own timing, and every choice creates a new direction. But the energy suggests they're becoming much more willing to let honesty guide them than fear. Taurus, if there's one feeling that lingers as I gather these cards together, it's that genuine transformation often begins long before anyone else can see it. Sometimes the first real step isn't the message that eventually appears on your screen or the conversation that may take place face to face. Sometimes it's the quiet decision inside someone's heart to stop running from what has always felt true. And for this person, it seems that quiet decision may be becoming stronger with every passing day. Thank you so much for spending this time with me, Taurus. As always, take what resonates, leave what doesn't, and trust your own intuition above everything else. You are so appreciated, and I can't wait to share another reading with you very soon. Until next time, take good care of yourself.